After reviewing all your initial analysis assignments, I figured I'd share some feedback of issues that were consistent across your projects. And so there are some areas of concern, and also I have some suggestions for you. One of the issues was regarding performance analysis, and here I did not take off many points, partly because I think this could have been influenced by the fact that we are asking you to conduct a performance analysis, but we're already telling you the problem is going to be solved by an instructional training experience. And so, many of you went through your performance analysis, and what you did was that you went straight from identification of the problem to training as a solution. And so for future occasions in which you do have to do a performance analysis in the real world, you really should check out the Robinson and Robinson performance relationship map that's on page 20 of the book, because that gives you a step-by-step process to go from the moment when you first hear there's a problem to the moment when you determine what the possible solution is, whether that solution is training or not. So that really gives you a set of questions that when you ask them, you really have a thorough performance analysis process. Then we have the instructional goal, and there were still some difficulties with the instructional goal. So for example, some of you were still stating the goal as if it was a learning activity or a teaching activity and not as an action that learners take, which will result in the closing of the performance gap. So when learners learn how to do this, the result is that we're not going to have that problem that we identified in the beginning anymore. So for example, if my students are not using primary research for their papers, that is a problem because they're really not using sound evidence to make claims. And so in the future, they're probably just going to continue to lose points in future assignments if they keep on citing sources that are just not reputable. So my goal would be that when writing academic papers, freshman students cite primary research to support their claims. So when I have that goal, the part where I say when writing academic papers is my performance context, and notice it is not a learning context. I'm not saying at the end of the workshop, I'm saying that moment when they actually need this skill. The learners, and in my case I'm being more specific, saying freshman students, and then the action is an action that will help them close the gap. And the action is they will use primary research. So I'm not saying they will learn how to use, I'm not saying they will know how to use, I'm not saying they will be able to demonstrate what you use. In that latter case, you're actually adding a lot of words when it could be simplified to just use. And so they will use primary research, and this is an observable task because I can take a look at one of their papers and see the resources that they've cited. Are they primary research or not? So that way I am writing a statement. It is a simple statement, but it indicates what the learners will be doing. The other thing was that in many instances your performance context was not really a performance context. It was sometimes a learning context, like when you said after the 1 hour session. In other times you were adding a lot of information about the physical space of the context, which is not necessarily going to have an impact on learners learning. So you were saying in a conference room with 10 chairs and one table, that really is not going to make a difference in the learning, so it's not necessary there. And other times you just didn't have a performance context. And so one thing you need to remember is the performance context is that place, that situation that will be prevalent when my students are going to apply this skill, not the situation in which they will learn the skill. And the last thing is that I still saw verbs that do not describe measurable, observable actions. So you still were using know, understand, learn, and those words are no-no in terms of describing behavior that you want to target in an instructional design. The next item was in your goal analysis, and the issues that I found were basically a few of you had steps that represented learning or teaching activities as opposed to steps to perform the goal. So again, this is very tied to how you write that goal. You write the goal incorrectly, then you're going to have an incorrect goal analysis and therefore a wrong subordinate analysis. Last but not least is the concern about learner performance and learning context analysis. And basically, there are very specific things you need to analyze, and they were listed in the book. But then the other thing is that you have to analyze them with the mindset that they are affordances and constraints that will have an impact on your design. I'm not saying that you did it this way, but when I was reading your paper, it felt like you were just writing these sections because it was a requirement of the assignment and not necessarily because, oh wow, in that performance context, this is the situation that's happening and I will have to mirror it in order to have a successful learning experience. Or in a learning context, hey, I'm going to have to teach students how to use computers, but I don't really have a good setup for computers there. So when you analyze these things in the future, think of these items as things that will impact your design, not as requirements of an assignment. So I hope these suggestions and concerns that I've shared with you, you're able to apply them into your final group project.